All right, recording in progress. So again, I'm David, alcoholic addict. We're here studying the book across all 12-step fellowships that use this book, the big book called Alcoholics Anonymous. So where we are tonight is we are almost at the very end of Bill's story. We're halfway through page 15, and Bill's story ends on page 16. But before we wrap this up, Other David is going to just sort of recap Bill's story. Good way to sort of re-summarize the key points. We're not going to go back through the entire thing, just sort of, highlights. So David, you want to take that away?
Sure. Thank you, David. My name is David. I am a recovered alcoholic and a drug addict. So I love Bill's story for the simple fact is it is a Bill's 12-step call on us. And that's the way I look at that chapter. So the way I look at the book and the way I was instructed to study this book, and especially this chapter, was to look at the first 8 pages and look at see if I drank, thought, or felt like Bill for identification purposes. So when I'm reading the story, did I drink like Bill? Did I think like Bill? Or did I feel like Bill in the first 8 pages? So I'm not looking for differences. I'm looking for similarities. I mean, how many of us go to meetings, we hear about the guy who had all those DUIs and has been married a whole bunch of times and been to prison, and this guy's done this, and I don't relate to that. And I think, well, maybe I don't belong. Well, what I'm trying to do here when I'm reading Bill's story is, no, I wasn't a second lieutenant in the Army. I didn't fight in World War. Those are all the differences. Let's look for similarities. So I can see the similarities in Bill's story. And the way I can look at that is by looking at the progression of this illness that he has. So it said is, so what I want to do is watch the progression. So the first progression is right on the first page. He talks about it and he says, lonely. He's feeling lonely. He comes out of Winchester as a cathedral, but he's feeling lonely. So what did he do? He turned to alcohol. That's the first thing that I do. It is my solution. And he talks about that. And then he said he had ominous warnings. He sees his tombstone outside of the cathedral about a guy who died from pot and not by musket. So he drank himself to death. A warning, an ominous one, but Bill pays no heed to it, and he continues to drink. And then it goes on. Then he goes on to page 3 in the book, and it talks about him he's going to get his law degree. And when he goes to his finals, he is so drunk that he can't even write or he can't even think. So that is the progression of this illness for Bill already on page 3. This is how fast this disease is moving for him. That's on page 2. I'm sorry. And then also in the next paragraph after that, though, he makes a remark to Lois. He makes this remark. He says, where's my note here? I lost it. He states that men of genius have conceived their best projects while drunk. So Bill's convinced that when you're drunk, you can make better choices in life. Men of genius do that, right? So this is Bill delusional, but he believes what he believes because he believes is a lie. And then when we go to page 3, the first paragraph, Bill talks about things that had happened to his life because Bill really was a millionaire on paper. So he had arrived is the language that he uses in the big book. He has arrived. Watch the progression of not only the disease attached to the ego. As the ego starts to grow, Bill's ego starts to grow. So Bill states, I have arrived. But then right after that, he says, but drinking assumed more serious proportion. So there's the progression of the disease. And then he talks about as he's made all these paper millions, he's got all this money in the stock market, and he's doing very well, that he's going to start hanging out at the golf course. He's going to catch up to Walter Hagen, who is a pro golfer, and he wants that impeccable tan. Impeccable tan is a reference to ego. He wants to be just like the rich. He wants to hang with them. He wants to look like them. He wants to be them. Then, right after that, he leaves there, and guess what happens? The stock market crash of 1929. Bill wobbles from the hotel bar back to the brokerage firm where he saw the ticker flashing, and the market had crashed. So what does Bill do? He went right back to the bar. Because why? Because what the doctor opinion told us, that he broke out in craving after the first one, he was going to have the second one, the third, the fourth, the 22nd one. So then after that market crash, Bill got drunk at that bar, but the next morning he came to and he says to himself, I got a friend in Montreal who has plenty of money. And shortly right after that, Bill and Lois were back to their accustomed style of living. Another phrase that references the ego. Bill's accustomed style of living. High finance, large money, paper millions, accustomed style of living. That's the way Bill talks, and that's the way Bill wants. So, and then let me see here what I got. Oh, then he lost it all. And guess what they had to end up doing? They had to go live with Lois's parents. So he burned it right to the ground and lost everything. Bill builds it up and he tears it down. Liquor ceased to be even a luxury, but it became a necessity for him. This is progression. Periods of sobriety, just to steal Lois's hope. He got drunk again every single time. He has no power. He has no choice. He has no control. Then he gets another promising business opportunity, and he goes on a prodigious bender, which is supersized bender. Just totally burns it up, loses the opportunity, which is related to the Jersey Lightning story, which is on the page. It doesn't talk about the story. If you want to look at it, it's on YouTube. You can see it. But he lost the whole thing. Then he talks about he has this appalling lack of perspective. So he's starting to question his own sanity when it comes to just not drinking, just as living, building it up, burning it down, lying to his wife, stealing, robbing Peter to pay Paul. This is a crazy way to live. He's questioning his sanity. But then he walks to a cafe to call someone on the phone, and what happens? In no time at all, he's beating on the bar, asking himself, how did this happen? Here's his feelings. Here's his emotions. Remorse, horror, hopelessness. The next morning is unforgettable. I hope you can relate to that if you're a real alcoholic like I am, a drug addict, right? The next morning, that is how I felt. This is the progression of this illness here. 2 more years go by. Doctor comes, his brother-in-law, Dr. Leonard Strong, and he administers heavy sedatives. Comes there the next morning, he finds Bill drinking both gin and heavy sedative. Bill really doesn't hit his bottom, guys. Neither does Bob, until he introduces drugs into his life. Just saying.
Yeah, because why wouldn't he drink both alcohol and sedative, right?
Of course. First hospital visit then for Bill is his brother-in-law and his mother both got Bill into the hospital to meet Dr. Soquart for the very first time, and Dr. Soquart describes to Bill what happens to the alcoholic's body when he puts alcohol in it, that he has this abnormal reaction to it, what the doctor calls a phenomenon of craving. Could not be explained at the time. Today we know it is not a phenomenon. We know it's just a craving. I shouldn't minimize it by saying just a craving. It's a craving beyond my control. I can't control once I put the drink in my body, and once I stop, I cannot stay stopped. That is Bill's story. But Bill thinks, wow, thank you for the information. Based on that knowledge, I think I'll be able to stay sober the rest of my entire life. I'll just not drink. That's based off of knowledge. Bill ends up quickly back at Towns Hospital for his second visit, where he overhears Dr. Soquart tell Lois that Bill is either going to, during delirium tremors, his heart's going to explode. I'm paraphrasing here, or he's going to have a wet brain. He says to himself, oh my God, this is scary stuff. I better never drink again. I think I'll stay sober based on fear. That means that's a reasonable assumption. Knowledge and fear, neither of them work. By the time we get to page 8, we're getting close to Bill's bottom. We find out that alcohol was his master. He states that in the book. He is powerless. He understands that alcohol owns him. The insidious insanity. Insidious insanity means that this insidiousness means that it's lying in wait, waiting for. The insanity comes before the first drink. It doesn't come after the drink, all that craziness that we do. Let's be real clear on that. If I gave you guys a piece of paper and wrote down the 10 most insane things you ever did in your entire life, maybe you'd write down that you went to jail, you got drunk, you drove around with your kids, and you lost your job, you punched your boss, you did all this crazy stuff. No, the most insane thing that I ever did was I picked up the first drink. And that's what Bill did wrong too. Then his childhood friend, Ebby, comes to calls him on the phone, asks him if he can come over, comes over to Bill's house, and Bill's drunk as a skunk, passes a drink across the table to Ebby, thinking he's going to relive childhood memories. And Ebby has this glassy eye, or this starry-eyed look in his eyes, It says, no, Bill, I found Jesus. That's the way he talked to him. And he says, I'm not going to drink anymore. Bill's interested, but not more interested than he is in his liquor. And they sat and talked for hours. So what Bill's mind snapped shut, though, actually, by the time that Ebby started talking about God. But then Ebby continued to shout great tidings. He never stopped shouting great tidings on what had happened. And then I'm going to read to you on page 12.4, fourth paragraph on 12.4, what Ebby told him. First, I'm going to read it to you you don't have to go there. It's just two short paragraphs. Page 12, second paragraph. My friend, which is Ebby, suggested what then seemed to be a novel idea. He said, why don't you choose your own conception of God? Bill's, remember, his mind snapped shut, but prior to that, he said, why don't you get a synonym of God? Creative intelligence, universal mind, spirit of nature, czar of the heavens, whatever you want it to be. We don't care. And then he says, it's only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more is required to make me to make my beginning. I saw the growth could start from that point upon a foundation of complete willingness. Willingness in that sentence means action. It does not mean just to be willing to do something in the body. The whole body has to be moving in motion to do something. I might build what I saw my friend would have. Would I have it? Of course I would. So he's got to find out what Ebby did for him to be able to stay sober. And then on page 13, Bill exposes us to the steps for the very first time. And he's separated from alcohol for the very last time, to never take a drink again. And God has moved it, had a sudden, profound impact on Bill's life. Bill got sober on December 11th, 1934, not to drink again until his death on January 24th, 1971, 36 years of continuous sobriety. So that's my summary of where we've been. And now we're on page 1515 for you guys. And let's get moving forward.
Yeah, and if you have any questions about any of that stuff that David very rapidly recapped, just put it in the chat, and we'll circle back to it because we only have about a page to read, so we can do that and then answer any questions before we move on to chapter 2. All right, so we are picking up page 15, paragraph 2, which is we commenced to make. All right, everybody there? Good? All right, let's do this. We commenced to make many fast friends, and a fellowship has grown up among us, of which it is a wonderful thing to feel a part. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty. I've seen hundreds of families set their feet in the path that really goes somewhere. I've seen the most impossible domestic situations righted, feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. I've seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. Let that sink in. In one Western city and its environs, there are 1,000 of us in our families. We meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek. At these informal gatherings, one may often see from 50 to 200 persons. We are growing in numbers and power. And there's a little footnote. In 2006, although you guys may have a more updated fourth edition, it says in 2006, AA is composed of over 106,000 groups. Sam?
Hi, yeah, I have a definition. I was just writing that down. I have in 1993, AA is composed of over 89,000 groups.
Oh.
So almost 20,000 in a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
I have vital, and I thought it was important to reiterate this definition. Vital is defined as life-supporting and life-giving. In the sentence, I've seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital, a life-supporting, life-giving place in their in the lives of their families and communities.
And can we say that word vital is so important in our book as an attribute of our program recovery, right? I'm always talking forward about it, and I can't wait till we get there. When Dr. Jung is talking with Roland Hazard on page 27 about how he needs to have a vital spiritual experience, a life-giving, a life-sustaining spiritual experience. Vital is such an important word in our vocabulary and terminology.
So we commence to make many fast friends. A fellowship has grown up among us, of which it is a wonderful thing to feel a part. How does that happen? Does that happen by me just going to meetings and being a meeting maker? That's not my experience. I know I sponsor a few guys that are on this call tonight, and that's not their experience either. It's about being involved and doing the steps and having that personality change sufficient enough to recover from alcoholism. See, my alcoholism starts where the bottle leaves off. If I don't make that change in my life by working these steps and living the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12, I'm not going to watch a fellowship grow up. Probably nobody's going to even know my name, possibly. But if I go to meetings and I take on a service position, a greeter, a chair setter upper, a chairperson, get a home group, do all these things, I will meet a vast amount of people and they will become my family. This is like my family. I will get to know hundreds and hundreds of people. I have over my time. But this does not happen. And the thing that happened with Ebby is Ebby passed it on to Bill to Bob, Bob to Bob D, and Bill went to Ernie G. But they all were recovered. See, they did something. You know, I've heard a lot of people say, if you want to be a chicken, you can't just put a chair in a chicken coop and think you're a chicken. You got to do something. You got to scratch around. You got to cluck a little bit. You got to lay an egg or two. Yeah, you got to do something. You know, but I got to do something of them, be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's just not enough to have a desire to stop drinking. I got to do something to watch this fellowship grow up about me. And then it talks about all these people here and how their lives have changed. How did their lives change? If I stopped drinking, my life did change. Period. The end. It really did. It got better pretty quickly, but it didn't stay that way until I started working all the steps in my life. So that means that my outside circumstances started getting a little bit better, but my internal condition did not. But as I worked all the steps and I got to step 9 and I finished all my amends and I lived in the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12 and practiced these principles in all my affairs, then my life started changing. I had a vast amount of people in my life. My family came back. Things were different for me, and I have friends all over the place today. Matter of fact, a guy broke his anonymity with me at one of my shops today because he walked up to me and he goes, "Hey, I just want to say something. I know you're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous because you're always smiling." And he goes, "The only reason I know that is because I just had 2 years sober." And I've known this guy for 2 years, but I didn't know that. And I was like, dude. And then he went about and told me what his story looked like today, not about the drunk log, about today. Dude, I was very impressed with him. And now we have a bond, right? We all have a bond. We do. We have a bond, an unbreakable bond. We will all be there for each other. We will watch each other. We want to know about you. We want to know all about you. I don't care about your drunk log and all the drama and the trauma. I care about what happened in the current moment where you're at today. If I can be of service to you, I will be of service to you, and I know you'll be that of me.
So everybody, let's just stop and think about this again. Let's just reset the context. What are we doing here? We're reading this book, Alcoholics Anonymous, published in 1939, right? Written mostly by Bill Wilson with some other contributors, of course, of a couple years before that. What was the purpose? The purpose was to share the experience of he and the first 100 or so people, how they recovered, right? And I'm sure I've said this before. I say it all the time. I'm a pretty smart cookie, okay? Very well read. I come from a family of very bright people. We all are big time readers. I came out of the womb reading a book, but I could not read this book at the beginning. So I could read a paragraph like this, and I'm just like, blah, 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 read, and it means nothing to me. Because at the beginning, I haven't received any promises. I'm still sick and twisted. My head, my heart, and my gut are screwed up 6 ways from Sunday. So I can't conceive of what is being promised here to me. What the entire point of this book was, the name of our meeting, purpose of this book. What is the purpose of this book? To show us how they recovered from the hopeless state of mind and body and how we can too. And beyond that, we can get the same rewards, the same promises that these guys. This is all loaded with promises here. If I come in with terrible thoughts and feelings and attitudes, if I'm able with a sponsor or a step guide explaining this to me, maybe I can start to get a little hope so I don't have to think, feel, and react so badly anymore. Here's a promise. We commence to make many fast friends, right? And I know it's not stated as a promise, but because it's out of their experience, and the whole point of the book is if you did what we did honestly and thoroughly, you're going to have the same experience as us. So this is implicitly a promise. You're going to make many fast friends and be part of a fellowship that's going to grow up around me. And that's a wonderful thing to feel a part. If you're an alcoholic or an addict like I am, when I was still sick, I sure as hell didn't feel like a part of anything. It didn't matter that I always had family and friends, et cetera, in my life. I always felt like I was on an island. They're telling me I'm going to have this wonderful feeling to be a part of something. The joy of living. I'm going to have a joy of living? That is a promise. Even under pressure and difficulty, right? Those certain trials and low spots, I'm still going to have a joy of living. What a promise. I've seen hundreds of families set their feet in the path that really goes somewhere. I'm going to be on a path that's really going to go somewhere, not into the path to the grave, which is where I was going before, headed 6 feet under. I've seen the most impossible domestic situations righted. What a massive promise. How many of us come in with marital problems, right? And again, sometimes those marital problems don't work out. A lot of people get better and they still end up divorced. Sometimes our partners can't let water go under the bridge, and that's up to them, and that's okay, right? That is not for us to be morbidly obsessing over or remorseful. Feuds and bitterness of all sorts can be wiped out. What a promise. I've seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in the lives of families and communities. Another promise for me. Business and professional men have regained their standing. Another promise for me. There's scarcely any this is the biggest one. Scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. What a wonderful promise. Does this mean my life is always going to be sunshine and roses? No, it does not. What it's telling me is I'm going to get through anything that happens, that I can get through this with God and recovery and all of you guys. And then it goes on to say in one Western city, and I'm sure it's talking about Cleveland, right? Because back in the 1930s, West was really east of the Midwest, which is crazy to think about. And what did they do? First of all, there's 1,000 of us in our families to talk about this. David and I and Sam and a few of us all here. We live in rural Illinois in the middle of BFE. Ain't nothing here. We're about 70 miles from Chicago, big city, but we're out in the middle of nowhere here. There's thousands of us in our little podunk farm towns we live in, right? We are so spoiled and lucky today, guys, much less all you who live, in big cities or in the suburbs of big cities. There are so many of us. So we meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek. Okay, so we all go to meetings, right? A lot of us go to in-person meetings too. Why do we do that? Well, here's one of the reasons, so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek. Ask ourselves these questions. When newcomers show up, are we helping them find the fellowship they seek? Or are we just showing up to meetings and taking what we need? Am I going up to those newcomers, someone I don't recognize, and say, hey, I'm David, welcome, want some coffee, right? David's got one of his sponsees, Minor. Man, if she sees a new woman in a meeting, beeline. She goes and introduces herself. Hey, how are you? Welcome, coffee, right? And at these informal gatherings, one may often see from 50 to 200 persons. Yeah, we're still enjoying that. We're growing in growing in numbers and power. I'm not going to get started on my latest jag, because today we're not growing in numbers and power. I'll save it for another time. We're falling down in the job. We are stagnating because we are not effectively carrying the message, and people are dying on our watch. Some of you guys have heard me talk about 3 to the 15th power, right? I can't help myself. No, I'll table it. We'll get back to it. We're stagnating though. In all our fellowships, in AA and CA and DAA and all of them, we're not doing enough outreach. People are dying on our watch, guys. It's our responsibility. to carry this message. What message? This message in this book, not my twisted message that's in my head, my heart, and my gut on those bad days, right? The message of the book. It's our obligation. It's my obligation. It's what I must do because I got better. Page 16, paragraph 1. An alcoholic in his cups is an unlovely creature. Our struggles with them are variously strenuous, comic, and tragic. One poor chap committed suicide in my home. He could not or would not see our way of life.
I have a definition
Oh, please. Yep.
for strenuous, which is defined as energetic. So our struggle with them are variously energetic, comic, and tragic.
Thanks, Sam. I was going to say, I don't know how long everybody's been around here. I mean, some of you I know, and some of you I know well, and some I don't know well. But stick around long enough. Sadly, you will see people die from this disease, this illness, either directly from it, right, wreck that liver, or indirectly commit suicide, right? Sadly, my best friend from high school, my best friend from college, 2 different guys, both died from this illness. One from the drink, the other from the noose. All right, we had a guy in our Saturday morning group that several of us go to out here in rural Illinois, regular member, committed suicide a year or 2 ago. We're always hearing about it, right? This is a terrible, tragic thing, the supreme sacrifice that happens too frequently. Why? Because again, we're falling down on the job. We're not carrying the right message. We're not putting our hand out enough. Listen, if somebody is truly sick in other ways beyond alcoholism, beyond addiction, we can't help them with that. But we got to make sure we're doing the part that we can do. Right? We are responsible.
Yeah. So an alcoholic in his cups is an unlovely creature. That just means being under the influence of alcohol. We don't talk like that today. I don't talk like that today in his cups.
It's like Shakespearean.
Yeah. So like a newcomer comes in the meeting, hey, look like you've been in your cups, you unlovely creature. It's like, dude, like he's going to run from me.
I hope Charlotte and everybody else in the UK is offended by David's bad UK accent he just tried doing right there. Right?
I was trying to do the King's, not the King's English there. I know my daughter goes, don't ever do an English accent. That's horrible. Our struggles with them are variously strenuous, comic, and tragic. Yeah, they are. There's alcoholics that come in who they think if they have some solution to be able to stay sober on their own power, then they're not powerless. I have to be able to qualify them. Page 44 is a great page to go to on that. And then the one poor chap that committed suicide is Bill C. He was a lawyer that lived with Bill and Lois for almost a year. He's the one that committed suicide. What happened there? He could not or would not see our way of life. We're going to read that, and you guys are all familiar with it when we read how it works. On page 58, those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. I have never met a cannot, me personally, but I've met a lot of will nots.
Exactly.
And the will nots that I have not met, tragically, they've taken their own lives or died directly from this disease. The real alcoholic, not the hard drinker, the real alcoholic. That's about all I got on that.
There is, however, a vast amount of fun about it all. I suppose some would be shocked at our seeming worldliness and levity. But just underneath, there is deadly earnestness. Faith has to work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish. Go ahead, Sam.
I have worldliness, which is defined as belonging to this world. And then levity is lightness. So in the sentence, I suppose some would be shocked by our seemingly belonging to this world and lightness.
So levity, like most of you, I suspect all of you have had this experience in a meeting. There's some newcomer in their first meeting or early, just few meetings, and they tell some tragic story that's funny, right? And so they share it and we all bust out laughing. That's levity. That's not us laughing at that person, though. It never is. That is always us laughing with that person because we can appreciate the insane, oftentimes deadly things that we have done that we got through these scrapes. And our ability to keep things light about it is a wonderful evolution of how our brains work, because then we can share with people and say, it's going to get better. You're going to be able to laugh about these things in the future too. I think that's one of the greatest things that happens in meetings. And fortunately, somebody always points that out. We're laughing with you, not at you, right? But I love the juxtaposition in this paragraph, right? So there's a vast amount of fun about it all. Again, if it wasn't fun, if I didn't feel better, if I didn't think, feel, and react differently, I wouldn't have stuck around. Because if I just traded one form of misery for another, why would I have kept coming back? I wouldn't have. There is a tremendous amount of fun about it. And yeah, some people can be shocked at our seeming worldliness and levity. But for all the laughing and all the levity and the making light, let us not forget there's deadly earnestness, deadly seriousness. This is a life and death illness, a life and death disease, a life and death health condition. If you're not clear about that, please get clear about it if you're a real alcoholic, a real addict, as defined in the big book. Okay? Faith has to work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish. That's a warning. How many hours in a day? 24. So how frequently, how constantly am I required to maintain my faith? Every single flipping moment. The question is, and I got this from Mark Houston and Joe Hawk, two of the most amazing recovery speakers of all time, both passed on. What is the current state of my agnosticism? This is a concept they bring up a lot. And what they're talking about is any day, any moment, what am I not willing to turn over to God? Or what have I taken back from God? Right? The point of my faith, my relationship with God that I gained in recovery, is that my will and my life, that's my thoughts and my actions, are entirely turned over to God. But as a fallible human being, what do I love to do? I love to still play God and take back my will. What is the current state of my agnosticism? What do I not believe God can do better for me than I could do for myself? It depends on what day it is. I can manage my marriage better. Ask God's opinion on that. Ask my wife's opinion on that. Right? Am I running my business, or am I running the business that God entrusted me with?
So the second sentence there on page 16, second paragraph, I suppose some will be shocked at our seeming worldliness and levity. Rule 62, don't take yourself so dang serious, Christ's sake. That's something that I learned. That's how I knew I recovered. When I could laugh at myself and stop taking myself so darn seriously. We in Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, or DAA, we do things ass backwards. We laugh at things we should cry at and cry at things we should laugh at. I swear to God. Like when I got locked up, I was 9 months sober and I had to go away for a while for the crimes I committed right before I got November 13th, 1999. That's my sobriety date. And when I went away, I've been in all these meetings in the last 9 months, right? My first 9 months sobriety. I went to meeting, met a lot of people, worked all 12 steps, started sponsoring people, speaking, doing all this stuff. People laughed when I went to jail and did my time. And when I came back, because they told me to, they cried. See, we do things ass backwards here because I came back. You know how many people don't come back because their outside world got a little better? No, I knew I was a real alcoholic. And when I was in the joint, I carried the message inside the walls because I had an opportunity to do that. So, and it says there, last sentence there, faith has to work 24 hours a day in and through us or we perish. Faith has to. That's a must. That's a must. Let's remember that. And what does he talk about? 24-hour day or we perish. 24 hours a day means we go to page 86, 85 of our book. and right after the promises of the 10-step promises, it says that we neither it says that is how we react so long as we stay in fit spiritual condition. Whose responsibility is it for me to stay in fit spiritual condition? Yours? Is it God's? Right on, Rob. It's my job. If it was just God's job, it'd be what Mark Houston says there. One page in the book. God does this for you. Shut the book, go home, have a nice life. No, I am responsible for the work in Alcoholics Anonymous out of this book and my fifth spiritual condition, or I will perish. It's that simple. In a 24-hour-day period, and I'll do this at another time, but Chris Hess gives a 3-exercise description on how to stay in conscious contact, how to stay in the moment, and how to be grateful. And I'll do that another time, maybe when David does his mathematics for us, which is very impressive too. So that's it.
Most of us feel we need look no further for utopia. We have it with us right here and now. Each day, my friends, simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself in a widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill to men. Bill W., co-founder of AA, died January 24th, 1971. God, all right. I feel like God is telling me to talk about this because each day, my friend, simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself in a widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill toward men. So what's he talking about here? What Bill is talking about is carrying the message and helping save lives. Okay, so if you haven't heard me do this jag before, or if you have, don't care, I'm going to do it again. I came up with this thought. God gave it to me a couple of years ago. I started questioning so I always look at Alcoholics Anonymous. I know some of us here are in different fellowships, but Alcoholics Anonymous is still the biggest fellowship, right? Because it was the original one. And it's been stagnant at the same as 2 million members worldwide for a long time, right? If you look back in the book, some of the content we already read, the first 4 forwards, AA's like growth was like this very sharp incline. And in the last several decades, hadn't really grown much, right? So what's the problem? The problem is, as recovered members, we are not multiplying and widening the circle. Do you know how easy it is for us to multiply and widen the circle? I'm going to tell you how easy it is, but I got to look it up again because I always get my math wrong. You'd think I would have it memorized by now. 3, 2, 15. Okay, so if over the course of my entire recovery, just think about this for yourself. Okay, some of you have been sober for a day, some of you have been sober for a century, right? We're all in there. If all I do my entire time I'm sober is effectively carry the message to 3 people as step guide and sponsor, 3 people only. I take them through the steps, I take them through the traditions, I get them into service, a home group, we're part of the same fellowship, all that. 3 people, that's all I do. And listen, guys, I'm in my 20th year recovery. I've sponsored dozens and dozens of people, okay? But if I only do 3, and I say to them, guys, you must carry the message effectively to 3 people. That's it. Only 3 over the course of your entire recovery. And then they tell each of those 3 people, right? So we're each just carrying the message effectively to 3 people and saying, make sure you pay it forward to 3 people. If we do that 15 times down the line, do you guys remember exponents from math? 3 to the 15th power, so it's 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. I'm going to tell you how many people that is starting just from me. 14,348,907 people. If we have fewer than 14,348,907 people, we are not effectively carrying the message. And I guarantee we don't have that many people. If AA is the biggest at 2 million, if all the rest of the fellowships had another 2 million, I'd be surprised, but it's about right. That's just coming from me. We got 33 people in this meeting tonight, times 33. 473,513,931 lives saved. Rounding up 500 million people. If we just carry the message effectively to 3 people and tell each of them to do it. So you understand what we're not doing Somehow we're falling down on our part, and then somehow downstream we're falling down. Other people are. We must stay out of the half measures, the fallacy-based solutions. We must stay strong in the book. This is our obligation. 10% of the population is supposed to be addicted or alcoholic. There's 8 billion people on the planet. 10% of that is 800 million. I just gave you math that this group can tackle 473 million. So the 33 of us can handle over half the problem. Go check my math out of this meeting, 3 to the 15th power, and then multiply it by 33. Numbers don't lie.
You got to love that, because it should give us enthusiasm. And if you had a spiritual awakening, that's the description of that for me, is enthusiasm. So I'm going to do my little riff too, just for a moment here. Mine's the three exercises. I got it from Chris Hess, who's a circus speaker. Some of you maybe have heard it before. So the exercise is this. It's so simple. You just do it in your head. The first thing that you do when you walk outside, and his sponsor told him to do this, and I heard this in the talk, so I'm going to tell you, if you want to do this, great. This is something that I asked my sponsees to do. So when you walk outside, look up. And then the second thing that you do, the next exercise that you do, he said, when you're sitting there, say to yourself what you're doing in the moment. In the moment right now, I'm speaking on Zoom to you people, you good people. And then when I'm driving my car, I say to myself, I'm driving my car. When I'm talking to a customer, I say I'm talking to a customer. When I'm eating breakfast, I say I'm eating breakfast. And the third thing that I do is I invite God into all those activities. I say to God, God, help me with this customer today to speak to them and listen well. Help me with my relationship with my wife. Help me drive my car, God. Help me do these things in my life. Help me talk on Zoom tonight. And when I do those things, here's what happens. So if I take the last one first, the last one, when I'm asking God to help me with all these things, that's a conscious contact with God. That means I have a conscious contact. That's the 11th step, a conscious contact with God. And if I do the second thing, where I'm telling myself what I'm doing in the moment, I'm talking here on Zoom, or if I'm behind the wheel of the car, I'm driving my car, I'm living in the moment. I'm not living in the past. If I bring my past into the moment, it's no longer my past, it's my moment. Or if I'm worried about the future, and if I bring my future into this moment, no longer my future, it's my moment. But if I tell myself what I'm doing in the moment, it keeps me current. That's all I have anyways, is this moment. And if I do those two things, when I go outside and I look up, I'll be full of gratitude. So check it out. See if it works for you. Works for me. I love that. I stole that from someone else. I've said it 3 times now. I have a sponsor said, if you hear something in a meeting and you say it 3 times, you don't even have to give that guy credit anymore. I get to own it. So that's all I got on that. Thanks, guys.
So that wraps up Bill's story. Do we have any questions before we move on? I don't know, Rob, anything in the chat or no? No? Okay.
Nothing in the chat right now, David.
Thank you. Okay. So last call for questions on Bill's story at this time. Anybody? Okay. We'll do a little bit of chapter 2. We'll get started on it anyway. Okay, so we're on page 17 now. Chapter 2, titled with a huge promise. There is a solution. Promise, promise, promise. We of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women who were once just as hopeless as Bill. Nearly all have recovered. They have solved the drink problem. Nothing, Sam? Okay. Go ahead, David.
So the chapter is, there is a solution. Full of hope here, guys. That's a chapter full of hope. Hope is a vision beyond my present circumstances. They didn't wait till the back of the book to give us this. There is a guarantee, there is a solution here. I have never seen anyone fail who has honestly and thoroughly done these steps before. Not that there might be a solution. There's one coming. When the doctor prescribe it, we'll get one. No, there is a solution. And as we read this chapter here, we start out with the word we. We're talking about the first 100. That's what this is. We, the first 100 of Alcoholics Anonymous, know thousands of men and women who were once just as hopeless as Bill. Let's take that statement and turn it into a question. David, first person, are you as hopeless as Bill? Boy, see, Mark Houston's really good at that, and he taught me and David both this stuff. Take statements in the big book, turn them into question, put them in first person, and see if you can identify it a little bit better. Because most of the time when I'm reading this, I think they're talking about kicking. I don't think they're talking about me. Love you, kicking. So I'm just saying, nearly all have recovered. David, have you recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body? Then the answer is yes today. Daily reprieve, contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. And then that's their experience, they have solved their drink problem. I cannot break out in craving if I do not have a drink, and something outside of a human power, a God of my own my God of my no understanding, has removed my obsession. No human power did that. That's it on that.
So I just want to, David did a nice job of covering all that. I just want to underscore a little bit. Nearly all have recovered. It drives me nuts when I listen to somebody and I'm trying not inventory. It's just like, man, are we all reading the same book? Or maybe people aren't reading the book when they say, I'm in recovery. I've been around 12 years. I'm still recovering. I'm like, well, did you not do all the work? Because forward to the first edition, when they first published this book, they said, we again, back to we, so I'm on page Roman numeral 13 in the fourth edition, XIII. We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered. They chose this language specifically. They didn't say, we are recovering. Here's what we're currently doing, trying to get better. They said, we've recovered, past tense, from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. They didn't say, we are cured. They said recovered. I always draw this analogy to another chronic illness I have. I am diabetic. I'm recovered from my diabetes in that my blood sugars are in control, right? Diet and medication, exercise, all that stuff, but I'm not cured. Can my diabetes become unrecovered? Oh, you betcha. I eat a half of a cake and I stop taking my medicine and sit on my ass all day, right? Can I become unrecovered from my alcoholic illness, my drug addiction? Oh yeah, you bet, right? Stop working the steps, turn my back on God, stop going to meetings, being a part of the fellowship, right? Stop being a service, and become unrecovered from anything. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. It drives me nuts when people take issue with that. David and I did like a 2-hour workshop one time in CA, and towards the end, we talked about, this is about being recovered. And then the guy, the speaker was after us, was all bent out of shape. He said, no, I'm recovering. I'm always recovering. And I'm like, okay, I didn't say anything, right? But I was just like, man, it's only said 21 times in the big book or something like that. And I think recovering is said twice, and one of them like is in a weird context too. So nearly all have recovered, right? And I'm sure Bill wanted to say all have recovered, but he got some feedback to soften a little bit of his language. And they have solved the drink problem. Well, did we solve the drink problem? I think God really did. But how did they and how did we solve it? By getting to God. And then God solved all of our problems.
I do have
Yeah.
some footnotes here,
Please.
where it says in the first edition, this read 100 instead of it saying we of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands. It was 100 of men and women who were just as hopeless as Bill. And then in the also in the first edition, it said all who have recovered. Not nearly.
Yeah, right. All have recovered, right? Why can't we all recover? You know, first of all, we got to qualify that person to make sure they're real alcoholic and not just a hard drinker. You know, the hard drinker can stop given sufficient reason. Give me a sufficient reason and I drink more. That's where I start drinking. Just give me a sufficient reason. I'll start drinking more. I'll do more cocaine. I just will. But the hard drinker, the moderate drinker can stop from a doctor. We're talking about the real alcoholic here, the one that's in a hopeless variety as Bill is. Nearly all of them are recovered, as Sam said. That was in the first edition. They solved the drink problem. They don't have an allergy, can't break out in craving. Obsession's been removed. I have not had an obsession since I was 3 months sober. That's a very long time. That was removed by a power grade myself. My job, as we talked about before, is to have that daily reprieve. It's spiritual conditioning every single day. My job. I never not do my evening review. I always do my awakening and ask God what to be divorced from. And I always say my prayers in the morning. I ask God to keep me clean and sober, to direct my thinkings. I pray for all the people in my family and you people and all that. And at night, I take that inventory. And when I take that inventory at night, I also ask God, I thank him for that day. And I ask him in my meditation, because I am so grateful for what he gave me that day. I hope in return somehow that he's happy with what I did with the time he gave me that day. I fall short most of the time, all the time, but I try to do better each and every day because I'm aware of that power. I have that conscious contact with that God today.
I think we got to stop here. It's 5 minutes to the hour. There's no way we can get into this paragraph. There's too much in there.
Correct. You're right.
Okay. So I'm going to stop the recording, then we'll do another round of questions.
Okay.